my friends, it's now time for the Soulful Psalm segment of Beacon of Truth. The Soulful Psalms, we take one of the Psalms from the Sefer Telachim, or the Book of Sung Praises, part of the wisdom literature of the Old Testament. It's part of the Tanakh, right? The Torah, the Nebe'im, and the Ketuvim, the law, the prophets, and the writings. So these are the Ketuvim, part of the writings of the Old Testament. And we hear these psalms in each and every holy sacrifice of the Mass. Weekday, Sunday, solemnities, feasts, we're always listening to the psalms. And this part of the show is where we connect the psalms to your everyday lived experience. So it's been a great joy for me because I absolutely love the psalms. I've been praying them for over 40 years of my life, and to share these reflections with you, hopefully will bring your reflections of the Psalms, when you hear them in Mass, to a deeper love of Jesus Christ and a deeper connection to your own life as well. Today, we're continuing our look at Psalm 71. So Psalm 71 is in Book 2 of the Psalms, Psalms 42 to Psalm 72, and Psalms 51 to 72 are all attributed to David. All right. And so Psalm 71 doesn't have a prescript or a superscript for this psalm, but we know that this psalm was written by David. So we pick up here in verse 19. So this is quite a long psalm. We started before, and again, David is crying out to the Lord, "In you, O Lord, I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame." That's how David started this psalm off. So now we pick up, let's pick up a little bit before, because verse 19 is actually mid-sentence. So let's start off with the previous sentence. He says, verse 18, "Even till I am old and gray-headed, do not forsake me, O God. Let me tell of your mighty arm to every coming generation." Right? So David realizes that God's providence, God's love, God's mercy in his life, even when he's old and gray-headed. Right? And I think about that now because I'm getting older and I'm getting full of gray in my own life, And obviously, when I pray this psalm now, in my late 50s, I'm hearing this psalm and experiencing it differently than I did when I was 14 or 24 or 34, right? Because now I do have gray hair, because I am feeling older, which my body reminds me of every time I finish working out, like, ooh, I'm not recovering like I used to do when I was younger, so those physical reminders are in a beautiful way. The physical reminders of aging, as a reminder that God will still not forsake us even in our old age, and that we're getting to a point in our lives we're going to able to tell the next generation, because we have years now of lived experience, not just the experience from youth, but now in our older age, we have life experience to be able to share our life experiences and how God has worked in our lives with the next generation, with our children, and with our grandchildren, right? Just as David did with Solomon. He says, Solomon, in 1 Kings chapter 2, he says, "Solomon, my teaching and the things that I'm telling you now are not just for you, they're for your children and their children and their children down through the generations." And then we pick up at verse 19. "Your strength and your justice, O God, reach to the highest heavens." So he said the justice and the strength of God and the strength of his mercy reaches to the highest heavens. So we've talked about this before, that when we talk about the heavens, what are we talking about? So when we say the word heaven, we obviously are thinking about the heaven where God dwells. Well, for our Jewish brothers and sisters, that's called the highest heavens, right? So there was the heavens, which was the sky. That was the first heaven, the sky and the clouds. And then there was a second heaven where the stars and the moon and the comets and asteroids. And then there was the third heaven where God dwells. So David is saying that God's strength and justice reaches to the highest heavens, that his love and mercy penetrates all the different levels of being and existence. It is you who have worked such wonders. O God, who is like you? Well, that's the point. There is no one like the Lord. There is no one like our God. There is no one that brings justice and mercy to the highest heavens, to every generation. No one but God. So our faith cannot rely on the lived experience of the world only. It cannot rely on science and technology. It cannot rely on AI, right? Our strength and our courage has to rely on the Lord. No one is like God. So we talked about this before with AI. As wonderful and helpful as AI is to create efficiencies within the way we work, to lighten our workload, to create efficiencies within systems, whether that be in music, whether that be in writing, whether that be in advertising, no matter what we're doing, as simple as every aspect of our life, AI does not have a soul. And so it may have quote unquote godlike qualities, but we can never attribute, we can never give honor and worship to AI because it's soulless and it's not made in God's image and likeness. So, wonderful reminder from David of who the real God is in our life.
Yeah, and I love this passage too from the standpoint of when you think about, how God's power works in our life and in those moments, whether it's deeply troubled rooted issues or just something that's kind of surfacial. I like the idea of being in a reflective place of restoration, of I don't know how God's going to intervene in this situation. I don't know how it's going to work out. I don't know what my role is. We talk about this often of staying out of God's way, right? And I feel like in this passage, it's a reminder of that we just kind of stand back for his restoration in whatever the healing within our own hearts or within a situation or relationship or work environment, that's surrendering to his power, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And I love the way you phrase that, surrendering to his power.
Mm.
Often we talked about war earlier, right? So the whole point of war is that so somebody surrenders, so somebody gives up.
Yep.
But in giving up something, you lose something. You lose something of yourself. But when we give ourselves over to God, we gain everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the opposite, right? It's not what you think. It's not a parallel with the world. And I think that's David's point here. That God, who is like you? Well, no one is like God. And then we have to recognize that and align ourselves with that beautiful truth. Yeah. Right? And David continues in verse 20. You have made me witness many troubles and evils, but you will give me back my life. Right? So the troubles and the sorrows and the adversity that David is experiencing feels that his life is taken from him. But he's confident that God will give him back his life, right? And we've all experienced that with the death of a spouse, with the death of a child, with the loss of a job, with the loss of something important, the loss of our sight, the loss of our ability to walk, the loss of our ability to speak. We have a stroke. We've lost something. Right? Something very important, something almost integral, if you will, to our own life. He says, but God will give me back my life. Maybe not restore us in an earthly way to how things were before, but he's preparing us for life with him forever in heaven. That's where he's going to give us back our life. And that life will be lived to the full because we'll be living in the beatific vision and face to face with God forever. You raise me from the depths of the earth. You will exalt me and console me again. So, Lord, you raised me from the depths of the earth. You raised me from the dung heap. You raised me from the depths of despair. You raised me from being trodden underfoot by those in the culture whose way of thinking runs roughshod over me. who have put me under their thumb. Lord, you raised me from those depths. You exalt me and console me again. Why? You give me your saving help. Whenever I look at that crucifix, I realize that how much you love me. Your love, your compassion, your mercy is what will give me consolation in my hardships and in my troubles.
For more on the Psalms with Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, check out Beacon of Truth weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and streaming everywhere you listen to podcasts.